I didn't want to talk to God about what I wanted for birth because I didn't want to be disappointed if it went badly, basically, which is such a silly thing to say, right? It's not a very faith-filled thing to say. But I do remember in my head, I was like thinking like I would love to have my water break just to feel what it feels like natural. And then I would love to not tear and obviously like have a water birth. Like those were the three things that I wanted, but I was like scared to ask God if I could have that because my pregnancy was so difficult.
Hi, I'm Kayla Heater, follower of Jesus, wife and mother of 5 children, Christian childbirth educator and doula, and your host of the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, where we share God-centered birth stories, evidence-based birth education, and our pursuit of surrendering our birth plans to God. Let's get started. Hey everyone, hope your week is off to a great start. My week is, I guess, because I just gotten home from class. I teach a childbirth class once a quarter, and right now we're in the middle of one, and I had a lovely time with all the couples tonight. Got home and sort of expected to come home to a little bit of chaos and some mess and, needing to make myself dinner and stuff. But instead, I walked in and my 2 oldest children, so my 3 youngest were asleep, but my 2 oldest children were awake and they were dressed up as waiters with name tags that they made. And they had a fire going and my husband was sitting on the couch. And he had a paper that signified where he was supposed to sit. And then there was one that said where I was supposed to sit. And I came over and they handed me some instructions for the evening, telling me that they were going to be my waiters. And this was a restaurant and I needed to use my please and thank yous, but that if they needed anything, I should ask them. And then they proceeded to hand me a paper menu that they made, which was hilarious because it had things on it like water, orange juice, oranges, celery, and ice cream, I think, were the items. So I proceeded to ask what their specials were for the evening. And turns out I got some good leftover chili as the special from lunch. So it was funny. And at the bottom of the instructions, it said that we were supposed to have a calm evening. It was hilarious. They really got into character and went for it. And it was just so much fun. I think it was my daughter's idea. And then my son took it and ran with it. And they really went all out. And they, brought everything, served us everything, took care of the dishes. They even brought out the dessert menu, and it was between chocolates and vanilla ice cream, which was really funny. And it was just great. And then they said, oh, actually, this restaurant is also a spa. And so she was filing our nails during dinner. And then she said, and it's also a hotel. And so we walked over to our bedroom door and there was a sign on it that said that we could sleep there for the night. And then there were little name tags above our pillows where we sleep. And it was hilarious. It was great. We were just letting them go with it and having a good time. It was wonderful. I absolutely loved the creativity and the initiative that took. And I got served dinner and didn't have to do the dishes. It was quite lovely. I got a new review this week, which is always so fun because I don't get them every week, but I wish that I would. But this was really fun to see. This review says, so needed. It's from Troopa Wife. And she said, I just found this podcast today and I've been binging it in every free second. I love how relaxed the conversation is. The concept of surrender is the pinnacle of having a beautiful birth story, and that has been the word of my current pregnancy. Highly recommend this podcast for all moms, especially first-time moms. Thank you so much for leaving that review. It means a lot to me, and it's really exciting to me that you found it. I don't know who you are or how you found it, but my guess is that it popped up in your recommended podcast because somebody else like you left a review, which is what helps it show up for more people. So if you are a weekly listener to this podcast, or even if you've just found it today and you enjoy it at all, I would really appreciate it if you would leave us a written review. It's so simple. You just scroll down, click write a review, and then write a review. It's really that easy. So thank you. Thank you for leaving that review. That means a lot to me, and it means a lot to this show and a lot to the future moms who will discover this show because of your review. All right, let's get into this week's episode. Virginia's first experience at her OB's office did not go well. And later on, when she felt led to have a water birth and found out that her OB didn't provide that, she switched providers. Being a first-time mom, she was more or less tricked into an induction at 39 weeks. And while it overall went smoothly, she learned a lot about what she did and didn't want for her next birth. When she got pregnant with her rainbow baby after a devastating miscarriage between her two sons, God told her she was supposed to give birth at the birth center. While her pregnancy was an emotional journey she wouldn't ever want to relive, she was granted the gift of her son in a beautiful birth that you'll want to hear all about. Welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. I am your host, Kayla Heater, and I've got Virginia with me today, and I almost said Mateo and Noah.
You would know if Mateo was here.
Yes, we would. And sweet baby Noah. Virginia, take just a moment, introduce us to yourself. Tell us about who you are, your family, your life. Who are we talking to today?
So I'm like, what is the first thing I think of? My age, of course.
How old are you?
I don't know why. That's the most interesting thing about me, I guess. I just turned 26 and I have two kids. And we have a lab puppy who I always say is like my third kid. Like I actually have three. I don't have two. And then my husband, obviously, he is in my life as well. He's a part of our family. I'm like, probably should start with that one. We got married back in 2020. So I was a COVID bride, which probably is another podcast on its own, honestly. And yeah, he's from Brazil. So our little boys are half Brazilian, half American, which is super fun. Yeah, I think that's about it. Just living our life in the USA, doing our thing, making babies.
Making babies in the USA.
Yeah, pretty much. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about the babies then. So take us back to your first pregnancy. Tell us the story. How did that go down? What was it like finding out you were pregnant?
Yeah. Well, we were probably a year and a couple months into marriage. So 2021, we found out we were pregnant with Mateo, and we knew we both wanted to be parents. Like early on in our relationship, we really just have a heart for just being a mother and a father. That's we think is one of our biggest callings in life. So we were really excited but nervous, of course, because you're only a year and a couple months into marriage. So naturally you're like, okay, we're doing this. And there was always the question of like, okay, God, are you sure? Like, this is the time? Like, of course we're sure that God gave us a life. But it was just like, okay, what's this going to look like? So yeah, Mateo's name actually means gift from God. It's Matthew in Latin. And so we also needed to find names that fit in all languages because between us two, we speak three languages. So yeah, he was a gift from God out of nowhere. I mean, we weren't planning, but we also weren't preventing. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, like, duh, what happened? But yeah, it was a great surprise. So yeah.
So wonderful. You're pregnant with a precious. Did you know it was a boy right away, or did you find that out like halfway through?
Oh, like if you know my husband, he would never let me just like never know. So we found it actually with the blood test, like at 11 weeks, which is insane to think about.
Yeah.
So it was a boy. very early on. And then we already had his name picked out and everything by like 16 weeks. So we were very like jump the gun about just a lot of things.
You didn't
Um,
jump the gun. You were just on the ball. How about that?
yeah, I guess, yeah, because with this one, it was very different. But first time parents, you're like, you have it all together, basically.
Maybe.
Maybe, hopefully.
So, how did you go about seeking care for that pregnancy then? Like, who did you choose as a care provider, and what were your birth plans and why?
Yeah. So my sister actually had a baby before me, like 3 or 4 months before me. And naturally, I was like, oh, like, where did you go? Like, where do you recommend? Because I've never been to an OB. Like, I'm really young, don't really know anything. So I naturally just asked the first person that I love and know, which was my sister. And she recommended this OB that she was going to. And so naturally, I was like, okay, great. So I called them, set up an appointment, and was like, this is going to be great.
And was it great?
No. So
All right, tell us why.
I don't know why, but it's like something's like on my face or something where doctors just say really inappropriate comments to me. I don't know if it's like because of how I dress or I don't know, but I just have a very different experience than most people, I feel like at least my sister, because my sister's like, what? That never happened to me. And I was like, well, it happened to me. So I
What
went.
happened?
So it was COVID, right? It was 2021.
Oh, yeah.
I'm still wearing masks. They told me that my husband couldn't come with me to the first ultrasound, which was really disappointing. It was a private OB, mind you. So I didn't know that like public OBs were doing something different versus private. So private, they can make up rules, whatever they want. So they had this rule where no one could come with you for your first any appointment or anything. So I go to our 8-week appointment alone. I'm nervous. I've never done this before. I'm also like really young. And so I do the ultrasound and I said, hey, can I FaceTime my husband? Like, it's our first baby. Like, it's really exciting. And they're like, no, you can't do that because of HIPAA. And I was like,
But it's me.
but it's me. Like, I'm giving, like, it's my. Anyway, I was like, okay, choose your battles, whatever. So I see the heartbeat. It's like really exciting. And then I go into the room to wait for the OB because that was the tech for the ultrasound. I wait in the room for the OB, and the OB comes in and she goes, literally opens the door and is looking at my chart and says, so I heard somebody got knocked up.
Oh, boy.
And
Not
I
like,
was like,
congratulations. I'm so happy for this new life.
mm-mm.
Wow.
I was
Oh,
like speechless. I mean, I'm speechless now. Like, even like it doesn't sound real, but that's actually what happened. So I just was like, yeah. Like, and I immediately was so upset. Like, I already couldn't bring my husband with me. And then,
that's the
first of
first thing you
all,
say
like,
to me.
that's so rude. Like, even if it is someone who you would call like knocked up, like, that's still a rude thing to say, like,
Yeah.
in general. Like, just don't say that. And then she was just like very matter of fact. And it was a woman too, which was really weird. So I was like, you would think a woman would like be more sensitive, but no, she was definitely leaning more on the other side of just like very direct and very just no emotional intelligence, basically.
Mm.
So that was my first like interaction with OB. And then I saw other OBs after that, and I was at that specific location until I realized that they did not offer water births. And I don't know why, but I had decided early on I wanted a natural unmedicated birth.
But you don't remember why you wanted a natural unmedicated birth?
Like, I don't know how I found that information because I didn't know anyone. Like, it was COVID. I didn't have any other mom friends. Like, normally I would ask questions to people that I know, but I didn't really know anyone. So I just went and researched on my own. And I just remember thinking, I want to have a birth that God designed. Like, just,
Mhm.
I want to know how God designed birth. And when I researched how, our bodies work, that's what I had come up with is, okay, I want a water birth unmedicated. And so I had decided that's what I wanted to do because I wanted to do whatever the Lord designed our bodies. Like, that was like the conclusion I came to, basically.
Yeah. Was
So,
your husband on board with that?
fun story. Remember I said my husband's from Brazil.
Right,
Every
right, right.
girl gets C-sections, like
Right.
everyone and their mom. If you don't have a C-section there, you're probably just poor. Honestly, that's
Right. It's like a status thing, right?
right. It's a status thing. It's also like just a lack of information, lack of knowledge. Most of the OBs there do not have proper training for natural birth, which is so funny to me because a C-section is literally surgery.
Right.
Like that requires like a lot of training. So it's a whole thing. So luckily my husband, his mom had all four of her kids natural back in the day. Now I don't know what happened with that or why, but she just did vaginally. And so my husband knew that I wanted to have a vaginal birth, but he had never heard of a water, like unmedicated birth. And what a doula was. Like, I did basically everything. I was like, I found a doula, I got us an interview with her, and he came along, asked us questions. And naturally, I feel like husbands or just men in general, they worry more and they have more questions. I mean, I know women who do too, but I feel like because it's out of their control and they're just really wanting to make sure that like their wife is okay and the baby's okay, they just naturally think of the worst, or at least my husband does, just thinks of the worst scenario. So he had no idea what it was, but he was open and had questions. And so I found him the right people to ask questions to. Because if he just asked me the questions and I gave him the answers, he still would have felt like, okay, I need to talk to someone who's like experienced this. So that's what we did. I set him up for success so that I could get what I wanted, basically.
Well, I'm glad that he was able to get on board with all that then.
Yeah. So basically, at like week, I think 28, I had realized that my OB did not offer water births. And I asked them why. And they said, because it's really dangerous. And I was like, okay, what do you mean by that? Like, because my research doesn't say that. So where are you getting that from? And they basically just had like no answer for me. They kind of just half gave me half answer where it was like, yeah, like there's a risk of this and this happening, like a baby drowning. I was like, okay,
Only if you drop them back in the water after you bring
you
them
pulled your
up.
baby under. Like, what do you mean?
They don't okay, let's take a moment for those people who maybe know nothing about water birth, is that when the baby is born underwater, so like you're in a bathtub, birth tub, birth pool, whatever. When the baby's born underwater, they are not going to start breathing air yet because their face, their cheeks actually have not hit the air because they're still underwater. And in order for them to take their first breath, they have to be in the air, and the nitrogen in the air actually touches their cheeks, and that's what causes them to take that first breath. So when they are born underwater, they are still getting their oxygen through their umbilical cord. It is not being like breathed through, their mouth and into their lungs. It's still just coming through the cord. So there's no risk of drowning for your baby because they're not breathing air yet. Now, once you bring them up from under the water and they are in the air, then no, you cannot put them back under the water. So once they're up, they're out and they stay out of the water. I mean, their face stays out of the water. It's fine if like their feet and booty are dangling in the water a little bit. But just so everyone is aware, no, your baby cannot drown underwater when they haven't actually hit the air yet.
There you go.
There you go. All right. So you must have switched practices and providers then.
Yes. So I literally, maybe it was even week 32. It was in the third trimester that I switched to a provider that would provide what I wanted. And so I switched over to a different OB office that also had midwives. And at that point, I was going to have a hospital birth, a water birth in the hospital. So this OB was connected to the hospital I wanted to go to. So it was like the perfect place for me to go, basically, if I were to switch and have a hospital water birth. And I went to a midwife instead of an OB, which was a completely different experience. I mean, bedside manner, relationally, And also, she was the first person because everyone around me was like, "What? You want to have a water birth? Like, are you sure? What is that? I don't know." Like, no one had really heard of it. And so I didn't realize it, but at the time I felt really like on my own when it came to my decision making, like support wise, besides like my husband and doula, from like my family or my friend group, they just didn't know. And so the first person that actually I felt supported by was my midwife at that place. And she goes, "Oh, you want to have a water birth? You got it. Like, let's do it. Like, you can do it." And it just really encouraged me at that moment of like, "Oh yeah, like I can do it. You're right. Like, yeah, we're going to do this, you know?" So yeah, I switched over, and it's never too late to switch providers. So
It's
that's
true.
one thing that I learned. I was like, it's never too late. Even if you're in the third trimester, if you feel uncomfortable with who your provider is, you can switch to a provider that you like. And you can also interview them before you commit to a new provider because you're the one who hired them and they work for you. You don't work for them. So that was the one thing that I learned, that that is the first step to advocating for your baby and for yourself, is to not be afraid to switch providers, even if you feel like it's too late.
It's true. It's true. I've seen people switch providers in like 39 weeks, 40 weeks, and one even during labor. So
Yeah, that too. You can fire up your labor.
never too late. Never too late. Okay. So take us to the labor then. How did it start? When did it start? What happened?
So my plan was not to be induced because we all know what happens when you're induced. There's risk of more intervention, and because I wanted a water birth, I didn't want to have any more risks because eventually, if you like, you can't get in the water if they start doing other things, basically,
Hmm.
because they can't monitor the baby in the water, like with their machines in the hospital. So I got COVID actually week 36 of my pregnancy. And because no one knew anything about pregnancy and COVID, they made me get oh my gosh, I'm going to forget. It's a PPG, PPB something, where they have to do an ultrasound every week to see the baby to make sure the baby's okay. It's like, yeah, it's a thing, where they just measure the baby and then also take the heart rate and just make sure that he was okay, since they had like zero data with pregnant women and COVID. So I went to a high risk OB for that ultrasound at a different place. I didn't switch providers, but they just made me do that extra appointment every week. And so 39 weeks, I go to my appointment. It's probably like my second or third appointment doing it. And I go there, and the provider, we do the ultrasound, and then he goes, "Do you see this stuff like right here in your fluid?" And I go, "Yeah, it looks like the same it was as last week. Like, just, it looks like vernix just floating around. Like, I'm not a doctor, but I'm like, this looks like the same stuff that's been in the fluid every single visit I've had." And he goes, "Yeah, so we actually don't know what that is. And it could be poop. It could be, fecal matter.
Meconium. Yeah.
And that could be like, the only way to know is to break your water." I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "So are you ready to have this baby tonight?" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, so just go home, get your bags, eat a snack, call your husband, and then go to the hospital tonight for an induction." And I'm like, "What?" Like, okay, I guess I'll have to do that. But like, what time should I be at the hospital? Because I'm like trying to wrap my head around what's going on.
Yeah.
And I'm also like a rule follower. So I feel like, oh, like, I don't know if he's right. I don't like, I'm like, oh, I'm not a doctor. Like, I don't, I have all these like inner voices in my head of like, what do I do? Um, and so he's like, "Yeah, it's not really urgent, but you need to be there by 8 p.m. tonight. Like, don't, like, I think it was like 3 p.m. at this point in the day." And I was like, "Okay." So then I go home, grab my bags, call my husband. He comes home, and we go to the hospital by 8 p.m.
Did he tell you, like, here are the risks of meconium in the water? Here's why we want to induce you, blah, blah, blah. Did he tell you any of that?
I think he did mention like the risk of like that, like, he's like, yeah, this could be meconium. The only way to break your water is, or the only way to know is to break your water. And the reason why we need to know is because it's not good. Like, it could have infection. Like, the baby could, I think he said,
Aspirate.
the baby aspirate, but it wasn't like
Yeah.
baby killed.
And here's the moment where I feel like I need to clarify for people that having meconium, which is like baby pooping inside of the sac in your water, is not in and of itself anything to be worried about. It's not standalone dangerous. It actually is a lot more common than people realize. I've actually had it in two or three of my labors. I had meconium in my water. And it's a lot more common, especially like the later on you are, the more common it is. And what people also don't realize is that that poop that's on the inside, it's not like our human poop on the outside. It's like sterile, right? They haven't been in the outside environment. They've only been inside the sac. They also, amniotic fluid is their pee, and they just pee it out and drink it in and pee it out and drink it in. They're like practicing swallowing and eating and everything. And it's all completely sterile. The only risk ever with meconium is that if it's like super, super, super thick and there's a lot of it, and they swallow a ton of it, then that is, yes, like something to watch out for when they're born, so that you can suction it out and make sure you get enough of it out so that they can breathe well in the air. But like, that is what does not happen very often. That is a lot more rare. And you would be able to tell more so with their heart rate if that's like becoming an issue at all. But the vast majority of the time, even if there is meconium in the water, which again, you wouldn't know until you broke your water, so it really doesn't matter. There are no issues. It just makes for tinged water. It's the heart rate is what would tell you if something was off or not. And if his heart rate was fine, then, which I assume it was because they didn't rush you over to the hospital in that moment, then it's fine. So I've heard, other people tell me, oh, but there might be meconium in the water. Well, there was meconium, and so we had to have NICU, blah, 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 blah. And really that in and of itself is not a risk. It's only if it's like tons and tons and tons, and they've swallowed a lot of it, and that would be reflected in their heart rate.
He made it seem very urgent. So that's why I was like, how urgent is this? Do I need to be at the hospital? He's like, oh, like, be there tonight, but like, you don't have to be there like super like now. So that's where I was like, okay.
That's a telltale sign that it's not actually necessary.
Yeah, I was like, what was the point of doing that? Like, you're not even my provider. Like, you're not going to be there. So why did you even, I don't even know.
Right, because they were only there to check out, for some reason, COVID observations. But that's what I always say at the end. If you agree to an end of pregnancy ultrasound, you agree to basically them pushing you into an induction for one reason or another. They'll come up with one, I promise you.
Yeah, still have to this day, have no idea why.
And it wasn't even like for sure there's meconium. It was like there might be meconium. We don't even know.
Literally,
And,
yes, exactly. And his heart rate was fine. So it was very interesting. It was very odd, but what do you expect?
but nonetheless, first time mom, you go and you go to
Yep,
the hospital.
right, exactly. And then we get to the hospital and we're in the triage waiting to go to a room. And I remember thinking, what did I just sign up to do? I was like, wait, I just signed up to do a water birth with no medicine. So I'm going to feel everything. But that was a good moment for me because it was like it didn't scare me. It was more just like, okay, like let's prepare. Let's start thinking about it. Let's like prepare because it's very mental.
hmm
And so 8 p.m. at night, they induced me with a Foley bulb. I told them no Pitocin, and they honored that. And my midwives were there, so I didn't have an OB. So like my midwives knew what I wanted, and then my mom came and she spent the night that night. And so they did a Foley bulb, and then they gave me Cytotec for that's like a. I'll just explain for people who are listening. Cytotec is basically something they give orally that helps you like ripen or like soften it. And so they did both of those things because I was like not even dilated. I was probably like 0.5 centimeters, maybe.
Well,
Like,
I was going to say to get the Foley bulb in, you have to be like at least like a centimeter. You have to be open enough for them to get it in there. So sometimes they'll give you the Cytotec. Usually they'll give you the Cytotec first to try and like soften things in hopes that it'll
yeah.
open you a little bit to put the Foley bulb. But then sometimes they'll keep giving you the Cytotec if you're cervix really isn't that soft.
Yeah, I think they only gave it to me once. Yeah, I think did the side attack first and then the fully bulb. And I was a little uncomfortable because that's when I started feeling contractions a little bit. And I was uncomfortable and trying to sleep. So they gave me a peanut ball between my legs and I was able to sleep during the night. And I had to rotate sides because like each side would get numb.
Yeah.
Because your body is just so full of water and it's just a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I slept over the night, got some rest with the peanut ball, and then I think it was around 7 a.m., 7:30 that my doula came. And they took the Foley bulb out, I think around 8:30 or 9, which means I was around 4 or 5 centimeters dilated. I remember they were like, yeah, just pull it out. Like, you got it. And I was like, what? And I was like trying to pull it out. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So then a nurse came over and just pulled it out for me. And that was good. I mean, my body was responding really well at that point in time. My doula was, she came, and then that morning we started doing different positions to help just pain management, but also I literally can't even tell you, I don't remember where my contractions were at that point, but I just remember, I was just uncomfortable, but the movement had helped me with the manage that.
So you were having regular contractions just from the side attack and the Foley bulb.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. A lot of first time moms, especially at 39 weeks, who weren't dilated, that would not be a thing.
No,
So that's
it
awesome.
literally was God. Because I did feel his presence over that whole thing in that moment because I just was so, even though I had researched a ton and I prepared and I made like a team around me that I knew was going to honor what I wanted, I still felt so like unprepared because of just lack of experience, right?
Hmm.
So I am just focused on managing my pain. I'm not really thinking about, oh, well, how many centimeters am I? Or, oh, well, my body's responding really well. Or, oh, no. Like, I literally was just in the zone of, okay, let me just ride these waves. Let me just focus on myself. I'm not going to focus on anything else because I'm the priority, basically. Like, so that was really cool. I was able to like zone out, and I had my Christian hypnobirthing podcast on, which is basically just this Australian woman speaking scripture over you and praying basically over you, which is hilarious because it's if she didn't have an accent, it probably wouldn't be as effective, honestly. So that was the morning of just getting it to move along, like basically like go from inactive to like the real deal.
Active labor. Yeah.
I was in inactive labor all morning, and then probably around 10:30, they were like, "Okay, let's break your water." And that's when
Wait, they hadn't. Wait a second. In my mind, I guess I was thinking that was the very first thing they were going to do because that's why he wanted you to go there. But then I guess they can't do that unless you're dilated. So then there's
yeah,
that. Hmm.
yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is interesting.
And
Hmm.
I was so out of it, like I didn't even think about that. I was like just focused on get this baby out of me. So yeah, they broke my water around 10:30, 11ish a.m. in the morning, and that's when I got really nervous. Like that's probably when I first felt fear in the birth process because I just knew that things were about to get more intense. And
Hmm.
I was just new at this and experienced. And so I told my doula, I said, wait, before they break my water, I need to tell you, like, I'm scared. Like, I remember just saying, I'm scared. And she just looked at me. She said, okay, if we need to take a moment to take a deep breath, if you need to cry for a second, like, we'll follow your lead. Like, just let us know what you need. And I really appreciated that because I felt validated. Like, it's okay if you have a moment of like, what's going, like, what is happening? Like, or if you're scared, if you have like a moment of that. But I think she just allowed me, she held space for my emotion. And then we moved on basically. Like, they're like, I was like, okay, I'm like, I had a little cry and I was like, okay, I'm ready. And I just really appreciated that a lot. So yes, doulas are amazing. And so they broke my water, and that was interesting. I don't know what I expected, but they put me on the bed and had me just like sitting, and then they put like a huge pad underneath me to catch the water, I guess, or whatever. And then my midwife came in and she just like inserted whatever it was that breaks your water.
A little crochet hook.
Yeah, that just sounds so weird. Like a hook.
That's
Ugh.
exactly what it is.
Sounds barbaric. So she inserted the hook and broke my water, and the water that came out, I literally thought it was the flood part two. It was so much water. Like I said, I didn't know what to expect, but that was not what I was expecting at all. Like literally all the water just came out of me like immediately. And then I felt Mateo's head go down, and it was not very comfortable.
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't.
It was very uncomfortable. Breaking my actual water wasn't uncomfortable. It was more the after fact of there's nothing cushioning his head now
Yeah.
because all of it literally came out. Like
Direct pressure.
it was just like the flood of water. Again,
And was there meconium in it?
nope, no meconium.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah. They were like, yeah, good news. Like there's no meconium. And I just was like,
Why am I here?
I was like, I'm going home. Like,
Right?
we checked and now I'm going home. Just kidding. But that's when things got more intense, as I knew they were going to be.
Right.
And Vitor, my husband, just looked me in the face and was like, he just remembers he was looking at me, but I was looking at him, but I was not looking at him. Like I was in a different world and I was unaware of everyone around me. So like if he came over to me and was trying to be supportive, I don't remember anything. Like I just remember I would close my eyes. Yeah, it was very challenging. It was a very long labor, start to finish. In my head, it was very long.
Yeah.
It was 21 hours total from start of induction at 8 p.m. to when we had Mateo.
Gotcha. Which is actually pretty normal for a first time mom. And actually, that's even a little bit quicker than I would have assumed. Okay. So you were in labor land.
Yes, I was in labor land, wherever that place is. Sure, it's different for everyone. And so my sister-in-law actually worked at the hospital at that time, and she came in to see me just to she peeked her head in because she was working. And she even told me, she's like, yeah, I didn't want to bother you at all. Like I just saw you were in the zone, you were doing your thing. I was like, yeah, I remember seeing you for a second, but I don't at the same time. So I just remember we moved around a lot. I labored on the toilet. I labored in different positions. We did the hip squeezes. We did dancing. Like me and Vitor, he helped sway with me, and he held me, and those really helped me a lot. And I'm really, really grateful that my doula was there to help me remember what the heck I'm doing, because I have no idea what I'm doing. My body knows what it's doing and it has a mind of its own, but me, I'm just along for the ride. I don't really know what's going on, but I'm just doing it. So basically, I got into the tub, and I remember I got in a little too early. Labor slowed down just a little bit, like contractions got a little slower. And I remember my doula was like, okay, let's get back out. And then she started doing other things to help me continue the process. And eventually, I remember I got to a point where I was on the bed, and I think I was facing away. I think I was facing how do you say it, the headrest.
Yeah, like the top of the bed.
I was on my knees and
Yeah, like leaned over it.
leaned over it, yes. And I
Yeah.
remember I looked at her, my doula named Mary. I said, Mary, I'm so tired. I was like, I can't do this. I'm so tired. I literally cannot. And she goes, 1 second. And then she goes and disappears. And then she comes back. She's like in my face. She's like, here, drink this. And she's like, you're doing great. We're almost there. I remember her saying that. She's like, and then she said, drink this. So then I drank whatever the heck she gave me, figured out it was apple juice mixed with clear collagen powder.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know, collagen is a protein. So it was basically and apple juice has some energy giving life to it. So it's basically a little cocktail of clear liquid that I could have in the hospital. Oh, I totally forgot about this. I also threw up everything I had eaten. So at that point
Oh,
in
wow.
time, which is normal, it was funny because I was allowed to eat during labor because I asked them like, "Hey, can I have something?" And so I had Panera before they broke my water, and then after they broke my water, I threw up all of it. So that was like kind of pointless at that point in time. And so, yeah, she gave me the little cocktail of protein and energy that I needed. And I remember feeling like rejuvenated, like, okay, like my mind was more clear. I felt a lot less tired and I felt more energized to finish strong. So I started, waking up a little bit and being like, okay, let's do this. Let's finish this, right? The athlete in me is like, okay, let's go. And so then it's time to get back in the water. And they're the ones who instigated that time because they kind of knew. They were like, okay, yep, she's ready. And so I got into the water. I was like 9 centimeters maybe. And then when I got in the water, I got to 10 and I started to push. Really just said, he's coming, because I felt the need to push. And my husband just started crying because he was like, oh, he's coming. Like, oh my God. He's like, we need to get the midwife. We need to get the nurses in here. Like, we need to get people to come. Like, he was thinking, like, baby is literally coming right now. Because, as you know, you can't really communicate well when you're in the middle of freaking transition. Like, so all I could manage to say was, baby is coming now, which obviously didn't mean he was actually coming now. I meant to say, I'm pushing. So I
Yeah.
started to push. I remember I was on all fours and in the bath, and I was pushing, and I just remember thinking like, okay, this is good. Like this is a good spot. Like I'm comfortable, but also I was really like uncomfortable and kind of sore at the same time. So I remember thinking like, I feel like I need to move positions, but I don't know what position to go into. And I just remember them saying, hey, we need to move you because we need to reach the baby when the baby comes. And I was like, okay. And so they moved me to a different position, but they moved me to my back in the water, which is not what I wanted to do at all. Like, I was like, no, don't put me in this position. Like, I want gravity to like help me with this. But unfortunately, they just put me on my back in the water. And so I was like sitting in the water, and I feel like pushing was really, it took about an hour, which is normal. I know that's normal, especially for first time. But that was probably like the longest hour of my life because I remember I was pushing, but then I kept feeling his head coming back in. So he would come
Mhm.
out a little bit and then he'd go back in, and he'd come out a little bit, go back in. And I was like, oh my gosh, get this baby out of me. Like, I was like, let's finish, like, let's go. Because the athlete in me is like, I'm ready to finish this race, this marathon I'm on. The finish line's right there, and this baby just keeps coming back inside. Like, no, we are going out. Like, get out of me, basically. And so it's very motherly, right? Get out. And so they were like, do you want to feel his head? Because he's crowning. Like, do you want to reach down and feel his head? And I looked at them and I was like, no. I was like, I do not want to do that. I was like, no. And then literally they took my hand and like reached me down there to feel his head. And I was like, okay, I don't care. Let's just keep going. Like, why are we
It's
pausing?
very motivating to some women, but apparently not to you.
No, for me, I was like, no, I'm good. Just give him to me when he comes out. Like, I don't want to do that. But that was just me being really focused on finishing, and not wanting to savor the moment. You know what I mean? I'm like, this baby's literally coming out of me. Like, I don't want to stop. Let's keep going. So I just was pushing, and like I didn't really know how to push, to be honest. Like that was one thing that I was just trying to get him out of me. So I was pushing even when I wasn't having contractions,
Mm.
or I was like trying to at least, and that was really hard, and it took a lot of strength and energy to do. So eventually he came out. He was very chill, very quiet when he came out. That's most water babies. They come out and they're just chilling because they don't have such a shock of air, and things like that. And then they tried to put him on my chest, but the umbilical cord was too short. So he was kind of like just below me, like on my stomach.
Mhm.
They started rubbing on him, doing the whole thing that they do in the hospital. I don't know anything about that yet. Like, I just was like, whatever. And then we did delayed cord clamping, which probably was only like a minute. So it was
So not really that much of a delay.
right. At the time, I was like, oh, this is delayed. And it's like, no. So there's just a lot I didn't know, even though I researched. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you knew a lot more than a lot of other first time moms, but
yeah,
you still were a first time mom. So you
right.
still had a lot to learn.
Right, exactly. And so he came at like 5:47 p.m. or 5:43. I have it in my notes somewhere. And they had Vitor cut the umbilical cord, and I felt immediate relief when he came out. Like, it was just wow. Like, oh, I can rest now. Like, I remember being like, oh, I can relax. Like, I don't have to do that again. Like, it's done, right? Um, but then when they were getting me out of the water, they put me back on the bed, and then they started. I didn't know this, but they give you pitocin after you give birth to obviously
Unless
monitor.
you tell them not
I
to.
tell
Yeah.
them not to, but they also don't tell you that.
Mhm.
They won't
Yeah,
tell
you
you that.
have to know that ahead of time and, like, let that be known ahead of time, and if you don't, they just do it.
Yep. And I remember the contractions from the pitocin to help my uterus go back down were a lot more painful. And I was thinking in my head, like, no wonder people get epidurals with Pitocin. Like, this is awful. Like, this is not the same contractions I was feeling like naturally.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was one thing I didn't know. If I would have known they gave you Pitocin, I would have said no to that. Absolutely not. After birth. And
Mhm.
I probably I had like a 1.5 degree tear. Like, so that's how she described it. So they gave me a little bit of stitches, maybe like two. And I just remember I was like shaking like so much after, like I had the shakes. Like,
Mhm.
I was a little cold, but also it was like all the hormones going through me. I was just like shaking so much. And I was prepared for that because my sister told me about it. She's like, yeah, just letting you know if that happens, don't freak out. Like, it's just your hormones and
Mhm.
all the things. And then, of course, give birth to the placenta and all that fun stuff. So yeah, after that, I we stayed in the hospital for 48 hours as the norm with first time parents. They make you stay a little longer to make sure you can keep the baby alive, like you know what to do. I guess that's their reasoning, right? And yeah, just the typical. They come in every 2 to 3 hours. They bother you. They push on your stomach. They do all the things. You can't go home. They give babies first bath if you want, like all the things. So yeah, that was Mateo, and I remember immediately feeling a bond with him. Like, I have never felt this kind of love before in my life, with anything. And so yeah, it was a great birth. I didn't have anything crazy happen, but there was definitely things along the way that I learned later on, like, oh, I'm not going to do that next time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and all in all, you're very lucky, like, to be a first time mom at 39 weeks and get an induction. And first of all, not end up in a C-section, but second of all, not even need to have Pitocin. And third of all, get to have your water birth. Cause I know at the hospital, especially the one that's around us, there's just a lot of red tape and a lot of policy around being able to get in the tub. It's like there's all these parameters that it's like, oh, if your blood pressure is too high, or if the baby's heart rate does this, or if if there's meconium, blah, blah, blah. It's just like there's all these,
Thanks.
you know, rules that risk you out of the water so easily. So it's amazing that you got to have that water birth,
Yeah.
the God designed natural birth experience, which is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So how did breastfeeding and postpartum go with Mateo?
I so breastfeeding was really easy when it came to his latch. So, like, he latched immediately and he had a great latch. And everyone, like, I don't know if they say this to everyone in the hospital, but all the nurses and lactation consultants were like, that's the best latch I've seen all day. Like, he's killing it. I don't know if they say that to everyone, but I felt pretty special at the time. I was like, oh, that's great. Like, awesome.
They don't say that to everyone.
Okay, cool. Well, I was really blessed, and because his latch was great, he came out just like with a great latch. But of course, 3 days later, what comes knocking on the door? Postpartum anxiety.
Mm.
I had extreme, like, just postpartum anxiety the whole time. I don't remember when it went away, probably a year after. I mean, it got better over time, but in the beginning, I was afraid to leave the house. I literally had so many intrusive thoughts about Mateo dying or me accidentally killing him or like abandoning him on the side of the road by accident, which I don't even know how that would happen. Like there was a lot of thoughts and a lot of things that really I just was like really just overcome with anxiety and just like danger, fear. That was one thing I was not prepared for because my pregnancy with him was great. I mean, I threw up a couple times, I had nausea, but I was like textbook, like nausea went away after the first trimester. I had the glow, like I didn't have any problems. I wasn't really struggling in pregnancy, but postpartum, I was hit with a lot of anxiety and I was just crying. Me and my husband, I was like, who are we? Like, we used to get along, and now everything's just like, what is happening? And it just like breaks my heart to think back on me like struggling that much and not having a community. Like if we're still in COVID, like, there's just a lot of isolation. I mean, I would see like my parents, I would see people, but like this was when like church wasn't even like in, like we weren't going to a church, didn't have a church community yet. We had just moved back to North Carolina from being away. It was a very isolating experience, and that was really hard for me. Mateo did great, but also, yeah, just being a first time mom and having that postpartum journey be really hard. It didn't affect our bond at all, but it definitely just mentally was not healthy for me. So that was kind of a bummer, but um, I recognized what was happening and I talked to my husband. I had my husband help me. I would share with him my struggles and cry and just, do all the things. So,
What do you feel like brought you out of that?
so I remember I left the house finally and I realized that it's not that bad to leave the house. I think exposure therapy, like just getting out and choosing to be brave even when you feel fear and not like forcing yourself and not like stifling your actual emotion because in the moment it feels very real. The fears you have, the things that you think are very real. So I had to give myself some time for sure. But then I also was just like, okay, like after I started getting out of the house, because eventually you have to leave your house and eventually life moves on. Like things are happening. You gotta change. Things change. And I just realized like, hey, this isn't that bad. Like,
Yeah.
it's not as bad as I thought, or it's not as bad as my fears were telling me, like, or that I was believing. So I think exposure therapy and getting out when you obviously not like the next day after having a baby, but I remember it was like a month or two. I finally left the house and I felt more confident in myself. And I was like, wait, like, this isn't that bad. So.
So then, almost a couple years later, maybe not quite a couple years later,
Yeah.
or maybe even less than that, when was your next pregnancy? And was it a pre planned decision that you went into, or was it more like the first time where it was like, well, we're not really preventing, so we don't really know?
Right. Well, Mateo, last year we started trying, and Mateo was 2, almost 2, and we started trying again. All my friends had just had babies, like literally all of our friends were having babies.
Yes, they
And
had.
everyone in our community group was having babies, literally like a couple months apart. And we were the only ones who weren't having another baby. And I did not let that affect me because I was like, one of us cannot be pregnant so that at least one of us is not in the thick of it so we can have like one of us take care of everyone. And I was just like jokingly like, oh, I don't follow trends. Like I do my own thing. I'm a rebel. I don't do that. So jokingly, I was like, yeah, just because you're pregnant doesn't mean I will like get pregnant. But we knew we wanted more kids and we knew that we wanted, to have more than one. So eventually we had to start thinking about it. And I wanted them to be close enough in age to where they would have like a relationship. I didn't want to wait like 5 years, right? Like for me, that would have been a little too long that I would, personally. So we started trying, and then we got pregnant probably 1 or 2 months in of trying, and we ended up losing the baby actually, like at 6 weeks. Just had a little miscarriage, which was really devastating to me. I remember I was really nervous to have a miscarriage. Like, I don't know, like with Mateo, I wasn't like nervous. I wasn't like, oh, like this could happen. But for some reason, I was like, something was off. Like, I felt like really nervous. And then I started having like just really weird symptoms, like so early on. And so I ended up having a miscarriage, and that was in November of last year. I started grieving, and like, we were really excited. I just remember when I had the pregnancy test, I was really excited. And then all of my excitement and joy was just taken away. And I just felt so like, God, what are you doing? Like, what is our family going to look like, because now we have to try again. And like, there's a little bit more fear now, there's a little bit more uncertainty. Like, are you calling us to have another kid? Like, it's the strangest thing. When you have a miscarriage, you just start doubting God's plan for your family. Even if you already have kids, it's still like very like, I don't even know what to think about what the future is for our family. So we started trying again a couple of months later and got pregnant with him. And that was last year, so 2024, of the spring of 2024. And when we got pregnant with him, I was actually still grieving, and I was kind of just like angry and felt very hopeless in that situation. And then we got pregnant with him, and it was kind of like at the point where when I got pregnant with him, I was just like, I don't even know if this is going to happen. And I give up. Like, like trying is really mentally hard, because when your period comes, you get really sad and disappointed,
Yeah.
you know? So I was dealing with a lot of disappointment and sadness, and I just gave up on like trying. Like, I gave up on believing that, God wanted us to have another kid so soon. So Mateo turned 2, and then a month later, we were pregnant with this little guy. And that was the point where I had given up, right? Like, I just wasn't even, I was like, whatever, I don't even care anymore. And of course, it happens, right? When you finally are just like, whatever, like, it's not in my control, whatever.
Well, you got pregnant again, which is a blessing and amazing.
Yeah.
Knowing the things you learned from your first birth that you said you wanted to do differently the next time,
Yeah.
how did you decide to seek your care this time? Who did you decide to go see, and where did you plan on delivering, and all those things? What did you do differently this time around?
Well, my first appointment with him was like 10 weeks. Because I was so unsure. Like, I didn't know what I should do. Like, at that point, I was like, I don't know what to do. And I think I got my first ultrasound at like a pregnancy center. Like, it wasn't even at a doctor's office or anything. It was one of those free like ultrasounds they offer. And it was at 10 weeks old, like 10 weeks gestation. And I just remember I was like, God, you're gonna have to just tell me what to do, because I felt really like just mentally foggy and not very like clear minded when it came to what to do. So I just told God, I said, you know what, God, I need you to just tell me what to do, because I don't know what to do. And I just feel conflicted. And he gave me a dream. And in the dream, I gave birth at the birthing center, the Natural Beginnings Birth Center in Statesville, North Carolina. And that was confirmation for me. I was like, okay, I trust you, God. I'm just going to do that. And so I scheduled my first appointment with them, and I think Vitor came with me, and it's an hour drive, so it's quite a ways away. But we went there, we had a tour, and that's where I started my prenatal care. And it was literally just because God gave me a dream that I was to give birth there.
Cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I forgot about that, honestly.
That's awesome. But several of your community group members had also given birth there too. So it wasn't like this foreign land that you didn't know anything about, thankfully.
Yes, I knew about the birthing center because of my friends who all gave birth there, which was nice. But that was also one of my hesitancies of should I give birth there?
Right. Understandably,
Yeah,
because not all of them made it there.
yeah. There's been two car babies in my friend group, so that was kind of like a big okay. Like let's see, and that was with their second child. So mind you, I was like, okay, statistically not going well with my favorite.
Right, right, right. Let's see. I'm thinking about your group. One of them had a hospital birth, though, and then another one had a home birth. But most of you had birth center births.
Yeah,
So,
everyone has been at a birth center besides one person, basically.
gotcha.
At some
Gotcha. Oh, right, right, right. Yeah.
Yeah, at some point in time,
Right.
they had been to a birth center. So, I mean, and I knew that birth centers were going to, their beliefs lined up with my beliefs about birth. And so I knew I could trust them to make a decision if they needed to make a decision on my behalf for some reason. That was to
Mm-hmm.
be what I believed in doing. So I knew, like, if I went to the hospital again, I might have had a fine experience and not had problems like last time, like real problems, but I knew that when it came to what I believed and what the hospital believes, it's very different about birth. Um,
Right.
we believing that birth is a natural process that just doesn't really need much help. Your body knows what to do versus hospitals like, we gotta be careful because birth is like dangerous.
So, did anything else happen during that pregnancy? Did you do anything else to prepare? Were you guys like what was your mentality and prep work going into delivering at the birth center?
So this pregnancy was like night and day to my first. I struggled a lot with, like I said, like I felt like my mind was very foggy. I didn't really have a lot of clarity. I was working full time. I was burnt out to the max for sure. I had like pregnancy anger, like rage, pregnancy rage. So I was
Mhm.
angry a lot. I was just not in a good place mentally or emotionally or physically because also this was the hardest physically than the first time. So this time around was completely different. And I didn't really, because of that, I didn't really have time and energy to think much about birth, to be honest. I just knew, like, logically making a decision to go to the birth center. God told me to go. I'm going to go. And then I'm going to hire a doula. And I'm going to set myself up for success so that, like, when it comes to giving birth, even if I haven't thought about it, I'll at least have the tools I need to help me, like, move things along and do another water birth. Because I knew I wanted another water birth because I just really loved being in the water, and water is a great pain management tool for labor. And so I just, because I was struggling so much in that pregnancy, I honestly didn't even want to talk about birth. I was like, if I'm already struggling so much, then birth is about to be a crazy ride. Like, I don't even know. I was like, I don't even know what to expect about birth. Like, it's probably going to be like this really hard. Like, if I'm already struggling now, I'm probably going to struggle even more, basically. Like, I had decided in my head, which obviously, like, doesn't make sense when you say it out loud now. But in the moment, I was very like, I don't even want to think about it.
I kind of get like that whenever I'm pregnant and I'm really, really nauseous, like, and I'm so nauseous that I can't like move without throwing up. It's like I won't listen to birth podcasts and I won't read birth books and I won't watch birth videos while I feel that way because then it's giving me this like sort of negative connotation between
Yeah.
how I feel in birth. And I'm like trying to distance those two things.
That's true. Like I didn't read anything about birth. I didn't even want to hear about anyone's birth stories because I didn't want to be cynical. Like I didn't want to because I wasn't in a good place. I didn't want to be like, "Ugh, whatever. Like you had such a great birth. I don't care." Like like just you're just in a really bad place because you're physically not doing well. And I was really nauseous this pregnancy too. So, I was like, oh, it's totally a girl because this is like insane how different it was. And lo and behold, it's not a girl, it's a boy. So I was like, okay, boy, interesting. Like, why did my body do that? But every kid's different. So, But I will say, I signed up for your birth class, and that is what helped me find the clarity I needed to know what I wanted. You, with your wealth of knowledge and just being face to face with someone versus like on a Zoom call or something, was very helpful for me to be in tune with, oh, yeah, birth. Let's talk about that. Like, let's think about that. And it had me reminiscing on Mateo's birth and some things that I didn't want to happen this time. Like, I didn't want to do the vaccinations. I didn't want to do the eye drops. I didn't want to do like the bath and that. Like, I just was literally like not wanting to do so many things that are small, but really were important to me. I just wanted to be left alone with my baby, honestly.
You were in a good class too. You guys had a good group. There was a good variety in there. We had some hospital births, we had some birth center births, we had some home births all in that class. So that was, I always think that that's good for people to be able to
Yeah.
hear each other's, like plans, desires, experiences, all that kind of stuff. All right. Take us to the end.
Yeah, his birth.
Take us to the end. Yes.
We all already know that I was struggling and cynical and like not wanting to think about birth and just like dooming myself, basically. That's what happens when you probably have depression in pregnancy. So that was October. I took your class and started thinking about it. And then, obviously hired you as our doula and had our little meeting, which was fun. Like just had our little
Yeah, a couple of those.
yeah,
Yeah.
we had a couple of meetings actually because we just talked so much about other things, which is great. And that was like November, like end of November. My due date was, what was it, December? I don't remember what.
13th. I
13th.
think it was
Thank
the
you. I was
13th.
like, what? I don't even remember. So it was December 13th. And so we met at the end of November. And that's when I wasn't working at that time. I stopped working and started just resting and giving my body and mind what it needed, which I think really helped with birth. And so I remember I lost my mucus plug on my due date, which I had not, obviously, from my first experience, very different, right? Because this time
Right.
around, I was not going to be induced and I was determined. And so I was able to not be induced this time, which was amazing. I saw my body start working on, like, I saw the early signs. So at 40 weeks on the dot, I lost my mucus plug. And I remember I texted you and I was like, I lost my mucus plug. And you were like, great, that means everything's moving along. Like your body's preparing. So then the next day I go, I remember in your class you had told us, if your due date comes and goes, don't just like stay at home and be sad about it. And you still don't have a baby, like go do stuff, like keep yourself busy. Obviously, don't like travel and do something like crazy, but just
What, you mean like drive to the beach on your due date like I did? Because you can do that too if
you
you're close enough.
do, you do what you feel is right for you. But yeah,
Right.
don't keep in mind like you're gonna have a baby soon. So we went on a little train ride the next day with Mateo, and there was like Santa and cookies, like it was like a whole Christmas thing, right? And I think I felt like one or two contractions. I started feeling like some cramping, and like I had like maybe one contraction, maybe two. Like it was like random, and I was like, oh, okay, like we just went on this train ride 45 minutes away. And now we're going back. Like, hopefully the baby doesn't come like today, like jokingly. And then that night I had like three contractions and they were like very spaced apart, nothing special, just like, okay, like my body's preparing, whatever. And then Sunday, that next day, I had more contractions during the day, probably like total of 4 or 5, really spaced out through the whole day. So I wasn't like super, like I would forget about them and then I'd have another one and I'd be like, oh, like, okay, my body's preparing. That night, Sunday night, I had them every hour and they were really sharp and really painful, which was really weird to me because I was like, why are they this painful? Like, I don't remember them being this painful with Mateo. And now I know why they were painful looking back. Like that weird pain that I felt. And that's when Vitor, like I like woke Vitor up every time and was like, hold my hand, like this is really painful. But they were only an hour apart. So it was a very weird feeling of like I'm in pain, but also the contractions aren't that close together. So I don't really know what to do. Like I'm just uncomfortable, but it's every hour, right? And then we like texted you at like 5 in the morning or 4. something in the morning, like,
Mhm.
hey, like, I think Vitor texted you. I don't even remember. But we were like, hey,
You did at first, and then he kinda took over eventually.
okay, that's what it was. Because they started being every 10 minutes apart. And the midwives at the birth center were like, hey, if you start to have them like 8 to 10 minutes apart, I just recommend coming in and like being close by because it's your second. And we're an hour away. We have to drive an hour. So I just remember thinking, rule follower me, like, oh, okay, yeah, like they're 10 minutes apart. We need to go. Like, let's go. So then we get in the car, you get in your car, we all go to
Oh, wait, wait, wait. Let's back up
you.
just
Am
a
I missing
second.
anything?
So
You tell this story.
so I need to, like, look up this text from Vitor, okay? Because your husband,
Oh,
your
yes, I
sweet,
forgot.
sweet husband
My sweet
texts
husband.
me. So I have this text from Vitor,
Mhm.
and because you stopped texting me, which is fine, and that's why I always get the husband's number as a backup.
Right.
And he's going back and forth. I can tell he's anxious. I can tell he's worried because he doesn't know if this is it. He doesn't want to miss work, but he doesn't want to have a car baby, which is exactly what I just don't want to have a car baby, is what he texted me. But then he said, but I also don't want to go there and have to come back. And I'm
Well,
like, I understand. So then he's like, you hop in the bath, and he's like, she's already had 3 contractions in the bath. Again, I don't know exactly what time you got in the bath. So I'm not, does that mean they're every, 3 minutes? I don't have that. So then I said, how far apart are the contractions? And he says, I quote, very close. We need to hurry.
oh my gosh.
And so when he says that,
I have no idea he's saying this stuff,
I
by the
know
way.
you're in the bath and hanging out, whatever. So he says that. And with me saying you're a second time mom and we have an hour drive to go to the birth center, and he says the contractions are very close, we need to hurry. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, shoot, they're, 2 to 3 minutes apart. We've got to go. So,
Oh my god.
Virginia, I don't even grab breakfast. I don't do anything. I literally just throw on my shoes, throw on my glasses, jump in the car with my doula bag, and like hightail it to your house because
Oh,
I know I'm going to follow you to the birth center just in case you have to pull over and have a baby on the way. So then
god.
you come out of your house and you're having a contraction when you come out of your house, which makes sense because you're walking. But in my mind, that proves to me,
Yeah. All the
that
signs are
you're
there.
all the signs are that you're having this contraction. So I assume it's one of those every 2 to 3 minute contractions. So you get in the car, and I'm like game to follow you as close as I can. I'm game to pull over the moment we need to. And we get to the birth center, and it was raining and dark and all the things because it's like 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
We get to the birth center, and I'm like ready to jump out and like catch a baby or do whatever I need to do. Cause I'm again thinking you're in like this super hard labor. And then you get out of the car, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how was the ride? And you're like, I think I slept some, I fell asleep. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, what?
Like what?
What? You slept?
There's a disconnect
Like,
somewhere.
and then I saw like how good of a place you were in. And my immediate thought was like, oh, we're not in active labor. But we're already here. So we're just going to go inside and see what happens.
This makes me cringe just thinking about that situation. Like I felt so bad. Like I was like, wow, okay, like that is not at all like what I was expecting. Um, I mean, it was funny because yeah, like I was having contractions every 8 to 10 minutes, but then they like slowed down when I got to the birth center, of course, because you move
Yeah,
locations and like I didn't feel as like comfortable,
right,
like safe. Not that like I felt like unsafe, but just you leave the comfort of your home and then you go to a new place. It's an hour
right.
away. Like it's a whole thing. It's like so, yeah, that's when we started to do the mile circuit and do
The curb walking,
all the things,
all
the
the things.
nipple stimulation, like
Right. Trying to get it all moving.
trying to get this labor going because when I got there, they did check me and they said I was at like a 4 or 5.
Yeah. which
somewhere.
isn't enough to stay there. Yeah.
Right. The birthing center, you have to be 6 centimeters to be like
Yeah, to stay.
to
Yeah.
stay. So they gave us a 2 hour time limit of like, okay, like you got 2 hours to get this thing moving, like no pressure, but like also like
But
just
also you're
letting
gonna have to go home if it doesn't.
you know, you're gonna have to go home or get a hotel. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna ignore that and I'm gonna focus on getting this labor started. Like I'm really good at tuning things out when I need to. So luckily I didn't let that bother me. I was just like, okay, whatever. I'm having this baby today. Like I was like, God, we are having this baby today. And I just like was determined. Like I was like, I know we're having this baby today. Like I know for a fact. Um, I don't know how, I don't know when, I don't know what, but we are. So yeah, we started doing that. We went outside. It was cold. It was like misty at this point. It was like wet outside. I'm in like my UGG slippers, like not even dressed right for being in the wet. And I just remember I could feel like my body was like stopping. And I was like, oh no, this is not good. I was like, what do I tell them? I'm like, what do I do? Okay, I'm just going to do all these things. And like, I know I'm having this baby today. So, like, yeah, just remain positive. Like, but unfortunately, we tried all the things and it was around what, like 11.
Yeah, 11 or 12. Yeah.
We went to get lunch because we had to leave at that
Yeah.
point. And over lunch, my mom was there. My mom came. My mom got there like literally as we had to leave because she wanted to be there for the birth. And I was like, whatever. So, yeah, basically we went to Panera Bread, we ate lunch, and that's when like my contractions, like we even tried pumping. Like I remember I was like, do you
Mhm.
pump? And you were like, well, I have my breast pump. Like, do you want to use it? I was like, yeah, if you're fine with that, like all whatever helps. All that's like, and I hate pumping because it's just when your boobs haven't been pumped in a while, it's just like, ugh. So
Yeah.
we'll do whatever it takes to get this baby going. Like I will sacrifice myself. So, like, So I remember I was like pumping in your car in the parking
Panera
lot
parking
of
lot.
Panera.
Good times, good times.
I'm pretty sure we have a picture of it somewhere.
I think we do.
Yeah, and literally, like, it was like my body was like, no, like, this is not it. And like, I didn't even have a contraction from that. Like, I don't even think I contracted at all, which is funny because with Mateo, they did some nipple stimulation with a hand pump.
Mhm.
And that was like immediate, like, contraction back to back. So I was like, yeah, I think my body is just done. Like, it's not even doing anything. So then we were arguing, me and my husband. We were like, what do we do? And I was like, I literally am just so tired. I want to go home. I don't want to get a hotel. And he's like, well, why don't you get a hotel? I'll go back to work. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the worst. Like, no, we're not doing that. So it was just very chaotic. Unfortunately, my husband is in a very high intensity, high pressure job. So he was just really stressed about just a lot of things, not even just the birth. So he was having a hard time just mentally in general. And I was already having a hard time mentally because just being pregnant and all the things. So I was just like, we don't know what we're doing and this is just chaotic. So I'm just going to go home and take a nap. Like, I was like, this is just when in doubt, go take a nap. Like,
Mhm.
don't make decisions when you're just stressed and tired. Like, just not a good idea, right? Pretty sure that's biblical too. So I was like, all I know is I'm tired. I want to take a nap. So let's go. So we hop back in the car and we go home. And my mom stayed with me. Vitor went back to work. He's in the fire academy. So obviously, like, fire academy is kind of like the military where, like, you can't really miss a day. And if you miss a day, it's like pretty intense. So they already knew, though, that he was going to have to miss a day for the birth. But yeah, it was very just a lot going on. So my mom decided to stay with me, which I'm glad she did. I definitely should not have been alone at that point in time because I was just really frustrated and just not even, I was like disassociating, but also irritated. So I was just like, whatever, like I'll just throw it in the wind and just be angry and whatever. So got home, you went home. I remember I was like, I'm so sorry, Kayla. I feel so bad. Like, you just wasted like your time coming here with us. Like, I just had so much, I felt so responsible for everyone like wasting their time. And I just felt really bad. But you obviously were really sweet and were just like, it's okay. Like, don't worry about it. Like, whatever. So
There's purpose in it all, Virginia. There's
that was
purpose
the
in it
first
all.
half. Yeah, that was the first half of the day. And it was not a good first half overall. And not that we didn't try. Like, I don't feel bad at all. Like, I don't regret as much anything because I knew we tried our best. So then at home, I remember I started having contractions again every 10 minutes apart, 8 to 10 minutes apart. They would not move. And that was the frustrating part. I was like, body, what are you trying to tell me? Like, what is going on? And I started actually listening to my body and being like, I remember feeling the contractions and then feeling like I needed to go poop,
Mhm.
but I couldn't. Like I couldn't. And it was like, why do I feel the need to go poop? Because like in my head, I was associating like pushing with that, but
Right.
I'm not even at that point. So what is happening? And that's when I texted you and said, I feel like I need to poop, but I can't. Like I can't. Like I'm trying and I can't. And that's when you were like, hey, you should go get an enema. Because you're constipated and you should go get an enema. And I was like, okay. So you're like, have your mom go to the store, give you an enema. So I take a nap for like an hour, and then my mom goes to the store and gets me an enema, which are already like you can buy the ones that are already made like in a
Mhm.
little bottle, not like an IV situation.
Yeah.
And so she bought one that was already made, and it had the saline solution in it. So I was like, okay, we're gonna do this. And the directions are you have to lay on your left side on the floor and you have to place it in your butt, like at a certain angle. So I literally was like, how the heck am I gonna do this? Like I've had this huge belly, I'm on the floor, like trying to get behind, like what? So my mom actually helped me with my enema.
What a good mom.
Helped me. She's such a great mom. She really stepped up and took one for the team. It was just like, we're doing this. No questions asked. Then I'm like, I get the enema, and literally within like a minute, I was like, go get a bucket. I was like, go get a bucket. Like, I cannot, like, it's about to come out.
Like,
Like,
I'm not gonna make it to the toilet.
I'm not going to make it to the toilet. Like, I will poop everywhere. And so I
Not
let
sure why you weren't laying right next to the toilet, by the way. What was that
Well,
about?
okay. My theory, well, okay, I know, right? It's so silly looking back. So the tile floor is very uncomfortable and it was cold. And I was like, let's lay down in my bedroom on the carpet that is plush, but also put like towels underneath me. Like I had towels underneath me.
Yeah.
But in my head, I was like, I want to be comfortable. But I didn't realize how fast it was going to work. I'll tell you, like, you just don't think, you're just not thinking straight when you're in the predicament I was in.
Yeah.
So now I know, go lay next to the toilet if you do an enema.
Right.
So any advice for anyone who's doing that, just letting you know. And she goes and gets a bucket, and I somehow flip over and just put my butt in the bucket, and then it all comes out. Like it was like magical because so yeah, I did that, and then I took a bath because I was still having contractions like 8 to 10 minutes apart. But then I got in the bath, and after the enema, it was like magic. The contractions moved to every 2 to 3 minutes apart. And I remember I had the feeling that baby's head was trying to come down, but it couldn't, like, it was like
Something was blocking it.
something was blocking it. And it was literally me being constipated that was blocking my contractions from moving and his head being like in the actual canal to get out.
Right.
And so I literally was like, wow, I don't know what I would have done without Kayla like telling me to get an enema because I would have just been like trying to poop on my own and it would have just been like really bad. So that was also the time where you just were like texting me like stop timing your contractions. Like just let it go and don't time your contractions. So I stopped timing my contractions, did the enema, got in the bath, and then they started coming every 2 to 3 minutes. And my mom was texting me. My mom was tracking my contractions for me, which I'm glad she did. But she didn't tell me. She wasn't like, "Oh, you just had one 2 minutes ago." Like she was just keeping it to herself, but she was timing my contractions for me, and she was texting you. Um,
Mhm.
and you were like, "Okay, let's give it like an hour of like, let's see if these are actually like 2 to 3 minutes apart, or if it's just like a one-off thing." And
Yeah, I
so,
made sure I got a timestamp from your mom because she, I think, used the phrase again, really close together. And I was like, well, how close is
like,
really close? I said, I'm gonna need a timestamp on what these contractions are.
yeah, like prove it, like.
Yeah. And she did, which was great. But I said, yes, let's let this keep going for a little while. Let's make sure it's here to stay and not like, going to slow back down.
Yes, and that's when my mom, like 45 minutes into that, I think, I remember she texted you saying, "I think you need to come here."
Mhm.
Because at that point in time, I really was like in active, like starting that process of being in active labor.
Yeah.
I was starting, I like had my mom, I took a shower, washed my hair, but I had my mom like braid my hair and I got on the ball to like do some hip things on the ball. And then you came in, like I think as my mom was braiding my hair or something. And then I was like moaning, like starting to moan. And you were like, okay, like we should get in the car. And like
Good.
I think it's like 6 p.m. and Vitor literally just got home from work.
We were waiting on him to get home
We
from
were
work so
waiting.
that we could
Okay,
leave.
cool.
Yeah.
Yes. So he got home like at 6:15 and we left by 6:30, I think. That's like how I remember it, like PM in the evening. Because at that point in time, they were not stopping. They kept coming 2 to 3 minutes. I was starting to moan. And side note, I just realized Mateo, Mateo was with my dad. So Mateo was picked up by a friend, and then my dad got him from her. So that was where he was during the whole time frame. But then, yeah, my mom came, you came, and Vitor came. And I remember on the way, I texted you like 30 minutes into the drive, which is halfway. And I just remember I was having trouble forming a sentence. And that's when I also knew things were getting more intense, is when you just can't like talk or think. And I just said, I don't know, something changed. I just remember that text message like, feel transition, push, question mark, like, I don't know. And you just said, what do you mean? And then I didn't respond because I literally was like, I don't even know. I was just like trying to like focus on the contractions and not like have them control me, but me be in like surrender of them. And so we made it to the birth center, but something felt different for sure. And when I was getting out, we made it around 7:30 p.m. And I remember I was getting out of the car, and I remember as I stood up to get out of the car, you came to help me get out of the car. Victor was there, and the midwife was there. Like all three of y'all were just like looking at me, like, "What's going on? Like, are we good?" And I remember feeling just water dripping down my leg. And it was not pee. I knew that for a fact. And I was like, oh, that's what changed. So I looked at y'all and I said, water broke. It's like, water broke, I think. And then the midwife's like, okay, yeah, we'll get you checked out. Like, we'll bring you in, we'll check you out. Like, that might have happened. And then I said, no, water broke. Like, I know it happened. And she's like, okay, yeah. And then she started guiding me into the center with all of you guys, like hovering around me. And then she like goes, like sniffs. And then she's like, this actually might sound weird, but I can actually smell your amniotic fluid. So yeah, like you might have like a high leak. Because it was like very, very tiny, like just a leak.
Mhm.
But my water was still intact. It was just a
Leaking.
little bit. It was leaking, right? So I was like, okay, that's cool. Like that's like my body's doing its thing. So at that point in time, I was like, all right, it's go time. Like we're in the zone. And so I got into the room and I remember they checked me and I was like, what, 7?
Yeah, you're 7.
I was 7 centimeters. They checked me. And then I remember starting my mantras in my head, like, you are safe. This is your final resting place. You can be safe knowing that your baby is coming. Like, just a lot of like mindset shift.
Mhm.
And I started doing my mantras in my head. And I just remember like having contractions in different positions. And then the midwife was like, oh, try some asymmetrical, what is it called?
Yeah, like lunges and stuff, and we were trying to
Lunges.
get your, like, backwards on the toilet, foot up on a stool, like, that kinda stuff, and then, like, leaning over that you loved the bathroom, so we were in the bathroom most of the time.
Yeah.
Um, leaning over that, like, shelf in the bathroom, putting your foot on a chair, stuff like that.
It's so funny, like how you don't really, like I said, like you don't really know, like your body just knows what to do. And
Mhm.
like you don't know what's going to happen, but you just do things because you just know it's what you need to do. So, yeah, I remember that was really helpful. And I think we were trying to get baby's head to move down. That's why we were doing the asymmetrical because his head was like still, like his head was definitely down, but it was like, he was such a small baby that I feel like he just had a lot of space up in there and he just like needed some movement to kind of help him like
Wiggle
shimmy
him
up.
down there. Yeah.
And so that was really helpful doing all those asymmetrical things. And then I remember I was on the toilet and I started like feeling like I started sleeping kind of in between contractions, which was
Mhm.
really funny to me because this birth was already completely different than Mateo's.
Right.
So I was very surprised that I was able to relax that much to like sleep because I'm pretty sure I was going into transition.
Yeah, you were.
Like that was,
You
and I
started to get
remember.
nauseous too.
Yes, started getting
Yeah.
nauseous, and I remember the transition last time, I was freaking out because I was so tired. I was like, "I'm so tired, but I gotta keep going." Like, in my head, athlete, I'm like, "You gotta push through." But this time around, it was like, "No, you can take a second and just sleep on the toilet. Like, you can put your head down and snooze a little bit. Like, just trust the process. Just do what you feel you need to do." And that's what I did. I was on the toilet and I had the pillow on top of the back. I was facing the back and I would have the contraction. I'd be like, like, doing the whole moaning, all that stuff. And then the contraction would end and then I'd just like,
Drift off.
"Please." And then I remember you and Vitor were taking turns doing the hip squeezes, which always, I feel like that's just a thing for me. Like that just made it more like tolerable.
Mhm. It was funny trying to squeeze your hips where you were seated because you're like the toilet was super close to the wall, obviously. And so when we're trying to squeeze, our elbows couldn't fit because
Oh,
the wall was right there. So
oh,
we're trying to just squeeze like without using our elbow. It was,
yeah. Oh
we were
gosh.
taking turns. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember y'all taking turns. And at this point in time, like with this birth, I remember I was still very aware of what was going on,
Hmm.
but I wasn't like worried or I wasn't like, oh, is that bad or oh, is that good? Like I wasn't like guessing or like doubting the process. I was more just like, yeah, I'm in labor and we're having this baby and I'm hanging out. Like we're just, and I literally felt like the Lord just bring so much of his presence in that moment. That's how I knew God was in the room because I can't even describe it, but like this birth was so redemptive in so many ways with just not being scared and not wanting to be in control, not wanting to it was just complete surrender. Like it was complete surrender, complete just like all right, bowing down and just letting God do the rest. And so it really was redemptive in that way and I remember I was like, "Okay, I feel like I need to go in the tub." Like, I was like, "Can I get in the tub? Is that okay?" And we're like, "Yeah, if you want." Like, "Sure." Like, because I was in my head, like, just not wanting my labor to stall again like it did the first time. Like, I was like, "Is it okay if I go in the tub? Like, is it too early?" But y'all were like, "Yeah, y'all you can go in the tub." And I was like, "All right, sure." I had no idea at this point in time that he was literally about to come.
Hmm.
Um,
You were
I
very
was just
close.
like I was just like, "Yeah, like, I could do this for 5 more hours, like, whatever." Like, I was like, "Whatever happens," right? And then I get in the tub, and then the midwife remember those positions she
That
had me do?
position she put you in for the first one, I'd never seen that one before. I was like, oh, I learned something today.
You get a picture of it? Like, just out of curiosity. Probably
I
not,
don't know.
but
I sent you all the pictures I
I
have.
need to go back and see because I don't remember. But I just remember it was so funny because I'll explain it to those who are listening. I'll try to explain as I can. But I was in the bathtub, like in the tub, birthing tub. My hands were over the side, and I was like leaning my head on the side. And then she had me bring my legs out from under me and go behind me, kind of like a seal.
Yeah, you very much look like a seal or like a Superman, like floating. Yeah,
Or
like a
like
floating super. Yeah.
Ariel when she's on that rock,
Yes, like Ariel on the rock.
like
Yes.
Ariel on the rock or something. And so she had me do that in the water and actually felt really good on my back because I
Yeah.
was like hunched over, like pushing. And then I went on my back and I had like a couple contractions there. And then after that, I started to push. I remember that was I started to push in the asymmetrical. I went back to an asymmetrical, like on my
Lunge type
like
thing. Yeah.
lunge. Yeah, I was gonna say, how would you describe that? Like a lunge.
It was like a lunge squat. Like, yeah.
Yes. I was like I was squatting and then lunging one leg, like one
One leg was out and one leg
leg
was
was
bent.
out, one leg was yeah, exactly. And then I moved. I think I got the comb at that point. Like I used the comb.
Mm-hmm.
It was really helpful. I was squeezing the comb for my hand for the pressure point,
Mm-hmm.
which helped me. And then I got on all fours. and I started to really push. And I remember this time around because I pushed so chaotically the first time because I just wanted to get it over with. This time around, I felt more of like the invitation to just enter in and just be there and let my body help me push. I'm like, don't push when I wasn't contracting. Like, that was the one thing. And like, breathe through the pushes. Like, and when I stopped contracting, stop pushing, which actually really helped me a lot have a better understanding of what was happening. But also, I feel like it was more effective.
Mhm.
He actually, when I was pushing, he was just coming out. He wasn't like coming back in. He was actually just like slowly coming out. I do remember feeling the ring of fire at the end. And that was insane because I did not feel that with Mateo. And I just remember that was when I started saying, I can't do this. Like, I can't do this. And that's when you guys were like, yes, you can. You are doing it. Like, you can. And then, like, you were pushing on my back to help ground me. And then the midwife had the mirror and like a flashlight, like trying to see because I was on all fours. I remember just her being like, just move up a little bit so that he has some space because you're literally sitting on his
Right.
head.
Right.
I was like, "Oh, yeah, right, I need to, like," because I was, like, trying to bear down, so I was like, "Oh, wait, no, I need to, like, actually make room for this child to come out of me." So I felt the ring of fire, started saying, like, "I can't do this," more just out of, like, a war cry of, like, "Oh, like, gosh, I can't do this," but then y'all were like, "Yes, you can." And then he came out. I gave, what, like, 17 minutes of
Yeah, it
pushing?
wasn't very long. Mm-mm.
Yeah, it was only like 17 minutes of pushing, and I was actually so surprised that he came so fast. Like, literally, if you think about it, he came like 3 hours. He was born at 10:23 PM. We got there at
Yeah.
7:30, and it was like 3 hours later he was there.
Mhm.
Like, I was like, "This is great." I was like, "This is the best birth ever." Like, he just came, like which is such a stark contrast to the morning, right? Like, the morning was, like, awful, and then literally, like, so much redemption that I don't even like, it was the whole day was just amazing at this point. Like, I'm like, "I don't even care that the morning happened. Like, this is great." But I remember I felt instant relief when he came out again. And I also felt so clear-headed for the first time. Like, I felt so clear-headed. It was like my depression had gone away, like a weight had lifted. And that's when I knew, like, okay, what I just experienced with pregnancy is so valid. Like, everything I just experienced was so hard, but like it wasn't for nothing. Like, it was literally because I was creating a child and I was a home for a baby. And so he came out and he was 6 pounds, 15 ounces, which was like a whole pound smaller than Mateo. And I remember it was just bliss. Like, I just remember being so happy and like joking around with you guys like immediately. And then like y'all moved me to the bed and then she checked me for tearing. And before she even said it, I kind of knew like I didn't tear because I
Mhm.
just felt so good. And then she goes, "Yeah, you didn't tear." She's like, "You have like a couple skid marks." I was like, "That's an interesting word." But you didn't tear at all. And I remember because I didn't want to talk to God about what I wanted for birth because I didn't want to be disappointed if it went badly, basically, which is such a silly thing to say, right? It's not a very faith-filled thing to say. But I do remember I in my head I was like thinking like I would love to have my water break just to feel what it feels like natural. And then I would love to not tear and obviously like have a water birth. Like, those were the three things that I wanted, but I was like scared to ask God if I could have that because my pregnancy was so difficult. I didn't want to get my hopes up. And so obviously that's not a very faith filled way to live. But looking back, I literally was like, wow, God, like, you gave me my dream birth and you gave me so much redemption even when I didn't even ask for it. Like, I didn't even come to you. I was so scared. Like, even, and it just reminded me of like how his perfect love just casts out fear. And the opposite of faith is fear. Like, all of that came from fear and not faith. And so his birth was the most faith filled experience I've had in a while. And he's perfect, obviously, like just such a perfect little addition to our family. And giving my son a brother is such a just magical, beautiful thing. Like, when we found out he was a boy, I just remember thinking, like, he's going to be the perfect addition to our family. Like, I just know, even if I'm struggling, like, at least Mateo will have a brother, and like, he's our little rainbow baby. So the whole thing is just like the Lord is faithful. That is what I can say. And even when we're not, even when we're struggling with our faith, He is still wanting to give us like a faith filled experience. So,
Hmm. Well, I was just going to ask what the Lord taught you, but you just told me.
yeah, I would say that's the big takeaway, like what the Lord did. So, yeah, I never want to forget, the things that the Lord spoke to me in that time. So,
Well, is there any last words you want to speak? Any advice you want to give mothers, or anything you wanted to share that you feel like you hadn't said yet?
um, I think just reiterating, like, postpartum anxiety is real. Depression, even when you're pregnant, is real. Those things are not, those things are valid. But also that the good thing about seasons is that they end, and there is light at the end of the tunnel, and there is hope. And just a reminder to put your hope in the right place. Put your hope in Jesus. Because He will not disappoint you. And that's actually in Isaiah, I think 59. It's in Isaiah somewhere where it says, like, put your hope and trust in the Lord, for He does not disappoint. And so when our hope is in the right place, the Lord wants to show us how good He is. And so, yeah, there's trials in life, but with the Lord, it's just better with Him. So,
Well, thank you. It is. You're right. And that's beautiful. And Noah's beautiful too.
He really is. He's the best.
Sweet baby. And he's done so great this whole time.
Yeah, he like wanted to hang out and party for a little bit, but now he's like, okay, I'm gonna sleep now.
I'm going to take a nap now. That was long, guys.
That was a lot of party. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. You can reach me at Surrendered Birth Services on Instagram, or email me at contact@surrenderedbirthservices.com. Be sure not to miss an episode by hitting the follow button. Also, we'd love for you to leave a written review of the show so that more people's births and lives can be changed by the love of Jesus and the empowerment of accurate birth education. If you really enjoyed this episode in particular, please take a screenshot of it and post it to your Instagram story, tagging Surrendered Birth Services. If you would like to be a guest on the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, please click the link in the episode show notes to fill out your interest form. Also, if you're interested in taking my childbirth classes, birth consultations, or having me as your birth doula, please click on the link in the show notes to take you to my website for online and in-person options. Just as a reminder, this show is not giving medical advice, so please continue to see your personal care provider as needs arise. We hope you have a great week, and remember, learn all that you can, make the best plans, and then leave it in God's hands.
Someone gave me a snowsuit, like a newborn snowsuit, just randomly.
Oh,
Like randomly. So like Noah, I mean, I'm not gonna like put him in the
he's
snow.
not going to like build a
He's
snowman.
not
He's
gonna
like
build
not even a month old yet.
like I'm like, it's kind of pointless to have a snowsuit for a newborn, but like we have one if we need it, so it's great.
I guess if you like live in Minnesota or something and the snow is there constantly and you're just always in and out, but I don't know. Yeah, I guess you'll just hold him in it.
Yeah, we're Southerners. We don't know what that life is like. So